Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the first video lecture for Chapter 7. We're going to be starting off with the basics, why understanding numbering and filing systems is so important, even though we've predominantly moved to electronic health records and away from paper-based records. So again, we still need to know about numbering systems, filing systems, all of that. And even as healthcare moves more and more towards complete electronic health record systems and automation, many organizations still use paper record systems. Knowing how these systems work will help us manage our information efficiently and ensure a smooth transition to digital records. We'll need to know a little bit about numbering systems. Most healthcare providers organize patient records according to one of three numbering systems. And these are either serial unit or serial unit. And as you can see from your text on table 7-1, each has advantages and disadvantages. And providers assign new patient numbers chronologically as patients admitted or readmitted, and the patient needs to maintain, again, here's that term we talked about before, a master patient index used to locate a patient's records. With the serial numbering system, each time the patient is registered, a new patient number is assigned and a new patient record is created. So if you have a patient that's admitted 7 times to the same facility, they would have 7 different patient numbers. And these patient records would be filed in multiple locations in the permanent filing system, which we'll talk more about in a bit. Patient records must be retrieved from these different filing systems when the previous records are requested. So if you have a patient who's got chronic conditions and they've been admitted 7 times to the same hospital, we're going to have to keep going back and consolidating all these things, which is kind of a headache. In a unit numbering system, patients assigned a patient record the first time they're seen, and that patient uses that same number for all subsequent admissions and encounters. This is where the term, we call it unit numbering in this text. You'll also hear the term unit record. So what that means is that you have one patient that has one unit record, and if they're hospitalized 7 different times, all the information will be under that one record. They'll all be labeled and secured together in one folder. Now, some variations of this, some facilities like the VA many years ago used Social Security numbering and family practices was popular for a while, but it's basically a form of unit numbering. With Social Security numbering, a patient's Social Security number is the unique patient ID number. It's their patient number. It's not always practical because facilities must assign a pseudo number to any patient who doesn't have a Social Security number. If you have somebody visiting from Canada and they don't have a Social Security number, you've got a little bit of a problem. You have to assign kind of a fake number. All right. And some ways they used to do this is create a 3-digit number that signifies the patient's first, middle, and last name, and then the date of birth is used to create the remaining 6 digits. There's some problems with this, as Social Security numbers have an issue of privacy. Just putting them out there for everybody to see and identify the patient makes it easier to use that. There are also people that have multiple social security numbers. We also get duplicate pseudo numbers. With family numbering, each household is assigned a unique patient number. And then you have a prefix. So let's say it's 10 for one family. And then you have a prefix of O1 for the head of the household, O2 for the spouse, O3 for the firstborn, and so on. And family practices, this was popular. Also used to see it in care systems that took care of entire families, right? Big downside of this is family dynamics. When the family composition changes, in the case of a divorce, remarried, or children get married, then it creates problems. With serial numbering, patient gets a new number each time they're seen by the facility, right? And the folders that held the previous patient records remain in file, and a note indicating a new note that there's a new number is inserted in the folder, right? So serial unit numbering, we kind of have a blend of both serial and unit numbering. And that's all I have for you. Come back for the next video lecture. We'll continue our discussion on chapter 7. Bye now.